This is the Anxiety Bites podcast, and I am your host, Jen Kirkman. Hi, welcome to another episode of Anxiety Bites. I am your host, Jen Kirkman. Today is a little bit different. I'm doing a solo episode. I will be doing a few of these throughout the season, but I thought it would be fun, I guess, to drop this episode on this particular Wednesday, which is known as the busiest travel day of the year. Maybe some of you are out there right now flying and you have a phobia of air travel like I did, and maybe this will help. Maybe it won't, but I have a feeling that I have a lot to offer because I had a massive phobia of air travel for decades, and it is nothing short of a miracle to me that I am truly not a phobic flyer anymore at all. I can't believe it. In fact, how this podcast started was an idea that I had a couple of years ago where I wanted to be a fear of flying coach. And I wanted to, not people who are afraid to fly coach. Don't misunderstand me. I wanted to be a coach for people who have a fear of flying. And I thought it would be cool to travel with people. I'd pay my own way and I would fly with you if you were a fearful flyer. And I thought, wouldn't that be kind of interesting to record that as a podcast or, I don't know, as videos or something? And as I started to seriously think about how would I do this, coronavirus hit and we were locked down and I had no desire to get in a plane with strangers. And then so during that lockdown of 2020 is when the idea for this podcast really was born. But it did kind of start with my desire to really help people who have a fear of flying. So I will break this podcast down into a few parts. I'm going to spend a lot of this podcast telling you my story of my fear of flying, what it was like, all of the ridiculous moments I had on airplanes because of this phobia, all of the things I gave up in life because I didn't want to get on a plane, the attempts I made at getting some recovery in this area that just didn't work, and what led me to finally, I don't know, gain control of this. That's a bad term to use, but to master this. I will also provide statistics and tips and information about airplanes and about what's actually happening to us when we're on planes, whether it's claustrophobia or something else. And then I will end the episode with a progressive muscle relaxation. But let's just begin with my story. I don't really remember the first moment that I realized I had a phobia of flying. I really don't know, but I know that the beginnings of it all went something like this. I was about 7 or 8 years old. I kept seeing commercials for Disney World on TV. I lived in Massachusetts. I have 2 older sisters. They were so much older than me that they already weren't living at home anymore. My parents and my sisters used to vacation down in Florida once in a while. They would drive all the way from Massachusetts to Florida. But in the 80s, I feel like air travel was starting to become, not something that just rich people did. And so I think I asked my parents, can we fly to Disney World? And I'd never been anywhere before outside of Massachusetts and, well, maybe New Hampshire. But they said yes. And I think I was excited. And I know that the whole thing was my idea. And then I think by the time that trip was over, I had a full-blown phobia of air travel. I do remember my first flight. I remember my dad being fascinated with the cockpit. That, again, this is the early 80s. The pilot would stand there in front of the cockpit door. The door would be open. And you could basically walk into the cockpit if you wanted to. And my dad asked the pilot, can we get a little tour? And I think I remember feeling anxious then. I was overwhelmed by all the buttons and dials as though they were going to ask me to fly the plane. And then I swear I'm not making this up. There was a spiral staircase on the airplane. I think it was Eastern Airlines. I mean, I know that staircases on planes are a thing on some flights. It's just one of those weird memory things. Did that really happen on my first flight or did I make that up? I don't know. But in my memory, I think I did see a spiral staircase and I just thought, whoa, wait, what? Like this is too many things in the plane. What do you mean there's a first class lounge up there? There's stairs. I mean, isn't this too heavy? How's it going to stay in the air? All that kind of thing. And, I don't know where the I don't know about what's going on in my brain where I see a cockpit and I immediately think the pilot's going to be too overwhelmed to fly, where I see a glamorous 1980s spiral staircase on a plane and I think there's too many levels on this plane. It's too heavy to stay in the sky. I don't know where that negative thought pattern came from. It's not important to my recovery in a way. But one thing I do remember, and again, I think I remember this. I swear my mother took out her rosary beads during takeoff. Now, my parents did not have a fear of flying as far as I knew, but they didn't fly often. It might have even been my mom's first flight as well. I don't remember. But we weren't very religious Catholics. We went to church once a week and then that was it. We don't talk about God outside of the church. And, the rosary beads only came out in an emergency, And so that signaled to me that something was maybe an emergency. And then my dad was clutching the seat during takeoff going, here we go, here we go, here we go. Was he trying to act excited? Was he really anxious? Was my mom anxious or did she find it normal to take out the rosary beads? I don't know. But I don't think their behavior is to blame because I really think I'm on a plane. I'm a tiny person, right? I'm 7 years old. And I had never been in a vehicle that was moving so fast. I mean, these things are speeding down the runway. And the sounds are so loud. And they're new sounds. And they're not sounds I'm used to. And then that feeling of this big thing rising off of the ground. And you hear the wheels coming up and clunking. And it's a very strange feeling. I mean, now to me, it's like, oh yeah, whatever. But back then, I'm sure it caused, as a lot of things do the first time we feel them, a little bit of sensations, a little bit of sweaty palms, my heart's racing. It could have just been excitement, but it immediately went to anxiety. And I'm pretty sure I probably had a panic attack. I just don't remember. But I do know that ever since that first round trip flight, I identified as someone with a fear of flying. And I thought it was very normal. I talked about it as though, we should have a fear of flying. I talked about it like it was a fear of, I don't know, jumping out of an airplane without a parachute, as though that was the same thing, And every year we went to Disney World, and that was the only time I flew. Once a year, round trip, 3-hour flight from Boston to Orlando. And every year, the anticipation before the flight, I don't know, probably began a month before every trip, just almost planning to be anxious. Now, I didn't have the words anxious or panic, but afraid. I guess I knew the word afraid. I guess I would have put it that way. I'm afraid to fly. And of course, what we're all getting wrong when we say that is we're not afraid to fly. We're afraid to feel anxious while in an airplane. We're afraid of whatever, the unknown. We're afraid of a plane crash, but we're really not afraid to fly because flying is a great sensation. But I mean, it got to the point where I couldn't even enjoy my time in Disney World because I was worrying about the flight back. And then when I was about 11 or 12 years old, maybe 13, I would say to my friends, well, I'm probably going to die this week because I'm getting on a plane. And I don't remember what their reactions were. I was always the kid that was thinking about that kind of thing. So I think they were used to it by then because I'd probably been talking about nuclear war, for all during the 80s as well. I remember writing a will on a cocktail napkin on a flight down to Florida. Writing, to my friends Shauna and Terry, you can have this record of mine, you can have this t-shirt of mine. I don't know why I thought if there was a plane crash that a cocktail napkin would survive. But I don't know. What a weird thing to do is to sit with pen and paper and almost not glorify, but give in to your worst fears. And after that trip, I just couldn't handle what felt like a 3-hour, I can't breathe feeling. And I said to my parents, it's not worth it anymore. I don't want to fly. I don't want to go on these vacations. And it's not a tragic story. I was 13. It's fine. Like, we don't need to keep going to Disney World. Now I'm, becoming a teenager and even though I love Disney World and still do, I got to act like I think it's corny and all that stuff. But, okay, great. So you say, well, some people never get to go to Disney World. What's the big issue? It's not it. But it was just that I had trained myself to believe something that totally was not true, that I was participating in something very dangerous and I was tired of risking my life, and I just continued to have an anxiety disorder after that, unrelated to being in airplanes. You'll hear me talk about it on other episodes with guests, so I won't get into it. We'll just stick to the flying. But then I went to college, only 20 minutes away from where I grew up. And there were a few things at my college where you could go study abroad. And I didn't do that because I was too afraid to fly. And I just thought, I even looked down on the other kids that went and thought, God, they're risking their life just to go to Amsterdam. I really thought this was a risk. Now, I don't know what kind of things got in my head. I remember when I was in 11th grade in high school, I was taking French as my language elective, and there was talk of maybe we go on a field trip to France, and the first Iraq War had just started. And some of the moms got together and talked to the principal, and they said they were worried about just overall terrorism in the world. And hijacking of planes was kind of a big thing in the 80s. And this was like early 90s, but I don't know if they were worried about that. So we decided we'll just take a bus and go up to Montreal. And I was so relieved. And I can't believe I was relieved and was like, oh, good, I'm going to get on a Greyhound bus. But, that's what a fear of flying will do. So then I get out of college and I'm never going to get on a plane again is what I think. And my mom found this, article in the Boston Globe about a class you could take at the airport, at Logan Airport in Boston. And it was a class for fearful flyers taught by a psychiatrist named Dr. Al Forgione. Rest in peace, Dr. Al. And it was called Logan's Heroes, which, if you don't understand, is a pun. There was a TV show, a comedy about Nazis called Hogan's Heroes. Anyway, we were Logan's Heroes. So I sign up for the class. And now my fear of flying is so bad that I can't even be on the highway driving to the airport and you start to see those signs for the airport. That is when the insane panic attacks would begin. The kind of panic attacks where my entire body, I'm not joking, head to toe, violent shaking and shivering. If I were driving a car, I probably would crash it into the guardrail. And so my dad would drive me to the airport every Tuesday night from 6 to 9 p.m. to take this class with Dr. Al Forgione. It was in the Delta Airlines lounge. This is pre 9/11, pre-security at airports. This is almost like right at the gate, And we met Dr. Al, and I'm the youngest person in class by 20 years. Everyone in there's probably maybe 8 other people. And yeah, they're all in their 40s and their 50s. A lot of it is their kids left home for the first time. Their kids, went to college somewhere out of state, or they got married and moved away. And the parents are afraid to get on planes to visit them. They don't know what's happening. They've never had this fear. It was like sort of came on them in midlife. And they all had different things. And yeah, they all had physical anxiety like me, but they also had other stuff that I didn't necessarily have. Some of them just didn't like being strapped in a seatbelt. That didn't bother me. Some of them were really afraid of terrorism. I don't think I was totally that afraid of it. We all had different things, but I really felt like I was the only one that was sitting there in the room, not able to breathe just because I was simply in the airport. I was getting lightheaded just sitting at the table. And we were in this room that was just wall-to-wall windows. The windows were shut. The shades were shut. And Dr. Al opened the shade a little bit, and you could see the nose of a plane just right there. And I swear to you, it was as though I was on a plane that was taking off. The panic was intense. And he shut the shade and said, we're not there yet where we can look at the planes, but that's what's coming. And pretty soon, every class, the shades will be open and we'll just be watching planes take off in the background. Just that thought to me was like, I can't come back to this class. But I loved Dr. Al. I loved his irreverence. And I always think I want to be a Dr. Al in terms of the way I approach talking about anxiety. He was he just didn't have anxiety. But he understood what it was. And again, you could still smoke inside back in those days. And he would drink his coffee, he would eat McDonald's and smoke cigarettes while he taught class. And every week we'd go over a different aspect of, working on our anxiety. And one of the weeks he talked about the things we put in our body and how it affects us. Drinking a Pepsi or a Coke on the plane is just full of sugar, and that is going to go straight to your adrenals, and it's going to make you anxious. Drinking coffee. I mean, this seems so obvious, but you might not think about that stuff. Drinking coffee, drinking alcohol. You may feel like it's calming you down, but it's dehydrating you. It's removing important electrolytes from your body, which you're getting dehydrated and kind of losing electrolytes when you're up in the air anyway. So it's really important to stay hydrated. It actually really helps your nervous system. And so alcohol can end up feeling a little bit at first like it's helping, but then eventually it just turns into sugar and you're anxious and dehydrated and possibly drunk. And so he said, no alcohol. And again, I think you could still smoke on planes at this point. He said, no smoking. And so this woman said, well, Dr. Al, you're sitting there drinking coffee and smoking. How come you can do it? And he said, well, I'm not the one who's anxious. And he had the greatest Boston accent. I don't know. You had to be there. But every week it was a new thing. One week we had a pilot come in and answered all of our questions. Is turbulence okay? What about if the plane gets hit by lightning? And he explained to us that a plane could still get hit by lightning and be okay. In fact, some planes, if they get hit on the nose with lightning, what's called a great ball of fire can travel down the aisle and everything will still be fine. I remember, I think the movie Apollo 13 had just come out, and this one woman in class said, no, what if the plane, it just goes too high and we're trapped in space? And he said, well, ma'am, planes can't leave the Earth's atmosphere. And then she seemed embarrassed that she'd even asked. And she went, well, fine, I didn't know. I'm not a pilot. And he said, well, no, that's okay, ma'am. There's no stupid questions. She was like, well, clearly there is. Like, I don't know what was going on with her that day. There was another woman in the class who was taking the class because she had tickets to fly the Concorde. I don't know if you remember that. That plane is not in use anymore. It used to fly you from America to Europe in 3 hours, and it went like supersonically high, and she was afraid of that. And so she wanted to take this class in order to get on the Concorde. And she was like this fancy, very wealthy woman. And, one class we learned about progressive muscle relaxation, which again is my favorite thing in the world for anxiety. I can't believe I haven't talked about it more on this podcast, but it's basically as simple as tightening muscles and then releasing them. I did talk about it a little on the Dr. Luana Marquez episode, but what Dr. Al taught us is you can't just go on a plane with anxiety and start jumping into your solutions thinking that they'll work if you haven't practiced when you're not on the plane. And so every night I listened to a tape, that's right, a cassette tape narrated by Dr. Al himself, and I would do progressive muscle relaxation in my parents' living room. It was about a 20-minute tape, and I did it every night. And the reason you do that is because you're most likely not panicking when you're at home in the living room. And you go through the progressive muscle relaxation and you teach your body that, first of all, just doing it is relaxing, but you do it in a safe space, and you do it every night. So that if you have a flight, in 6 weeks, you do it every night for 6 weeks. And then when you get on the plane, you start going into your progressive muscle relaxation, and something in your body kind of clicks and says, this is what we do in a safe space. And it's not the only thing. You're not going to be cured of your fear of flying if you do that, but it's a really good tool. But to really, really, really have it work, you must practice progressive muscle relaxation every day leading up to the thing that you're going to use progressive muscle relaxation for. We learned about relaxing our bodies. We learned about not putting all of, sugar, alcohol, caffeine, tobacco into our systems. We had the pilot teach us things. We learned how to rate our anxiety on a scale of 0 to 10. And throughout this, I think it was an 8 to 10 week course, throughout these weeks, we began to rate our anxiety at the beginning of every class. And mine was still pretty up there. I mean, mine was a 5, and other people would be like a 2. I'm at a 2. I'm at a 0. I loved the class though. And I loved listening to the relaxation tapes every night. And again, that great Boston accent of Dr. Al. Relax your calves. Relax your arms. So the class would culminate in a round-trip flight from Boston's Logan Airport, Logan's Heroes, to LaGuardia, New York, and back. That's a 40 to 45-minute flight each way. So 90 minutes total. And the class before the final flight, we just went on a plane. And I was so afraid to get on the plane. I didn't trust the doctor. I thought that they were going to somehow get a pilot in there and have the plane take off. And go, see, I knew you guys could do it. I was terrified. I didn't like being on the plane. And everybody else in the class, when they walked on the plane and we sat down and we put our seatbelt on and we started doing the progressive muscle relaxation, we started practicing, getting used to feeling like being on a plane. Everyone else said, Dr. Al, my anxiety is down to a 1 or a 2. Mine was 20,000. And I did not know how I was going to handle the flight the next week. And we all showed up at the airport, again, paid cash for our flights. I don't even think you had to show your ID. I mean, I feel like how am I not 100 years old with stories like that? And at the last minute, I got so scared, I asked my mom to join me on the flight because my parents were with me at the airport. Now, I don't know why I asked my mom. It's not like she was some like fearless flying, dynamo. I mean, she wasn't a fearful flyer, but she didn't sit near me. She just was on the plane. I think my reasoning for that was there was something in the back of my head that's like, I don't want my mom to die. And if I really thought we were going to die in this plane, I wouldn't ask her to come on. So it was like that kind of thing. So I was sitting next to the doctor and we get on the plane and there are, quote, normal people on this flight too. They're business people going from Boston to New York City in the morning. This is a weekday morning. And we're sitting there on the flight and Dr. Al says, begin the relaxation. And he is calling out to us the progressive muscle relaxation moves. And people are turning around and he goes, these are fearless flyers. These are Logan's heroes. They have taken this class to overcome their fear of flying. And everyone started applauding. Oh, good for you. So we're up there and I am terrified. I mean, I do not relate to anyone. I am white knuckling. The doctor is taking my hand and trying to un-white knuckle it. And he's saying, Jennifer, are you really this afraid? And I said, yeah. And he's like, he seemed so disappointed. Now, as a hyper-vigilant, anxious person, I was counting down these seconds until the flight was going to land. And I knew we were over New York City. And I'm thinking, why aren't we landing? And nobody else is noticing. They're all looking out the window. They're like practically like face smushed, like they're trying to jump out the window. Dr. Al, my anxiety is a 0. I love it up here. I love it. And I'm like, I hate the Wright brothers. Why did they have to invent flight? We should all just stay on the ground. It's so much easier. I am freaking out. And I am saying, why aren't we landing? And the pilot's like, we're going to circle the airport. And I'm like, why? Why are we circling? Why? What's going on? I'd never been in a plane that had to circle before. It seems like something really bad must be happening, which if your pilot ever has to circle the airport, nothing bad is happening. But anyway, we landed late. But when we got to the airport, there was a different vibe than had been at the Boston airport. And again, this is so pre-9/11. Well, about 5 years. But there was no going through our bags or metal detectors. That was not a thing. But there was it wasn't the National Guard, but it was some uniformed people there. And we had to, go back in the airport and get our boarding pass for the flight back to Boston and, get back in line. And they went through our purses. And it was like the injustice of it. What do you mean you're going through my things? And the fancy woman had this really elaborate pen. And I remember that they're dismantling my pen. They were taking her pen apart. And I said to the doctor, why is this like weird SWAT team going through our things? What is going on? Why was the flight circling? And because I saw the doctor talking to one of these security guys. And the doctor was like, all right, don't tell the other people. There was a little incident with a bomb threat. It's fine. I'm like, a bomb threat? What happened? And he's like, I don't know. There was a bomb threat in the parking garage, but it's all set. And I said, well, did they find a bomb? No. And I said, well, did they find the person? He said, no. I said, well, wait a minute. I'm supposed to feel better that there was a bomb threat, but no bomb or person was found? So we just keep going? I mean, we don't shut it down until we absolutely find a bomb. If we have to take apart the entire airport brick by brick, what if the bomb is on a plane? That's where the guy put it. He was hiding in the parking garage, and the authorities were called, and then he went, oh, I gotta go, and he ran and put it on a plane when no one was looking. And the doctor was like, Jennifer, please. We'll be right back.
Are you dealing with best life burnout, constantly striving for more, and quite frankly, over it? Maybe you just want more joy, peace, and laughter in your life now. Well, then let's go. Welcome to your new favorite podcast, Hot Happy Mess, hosted by me, your girl, Zuri Hall. Join us each week as we discuss dating, relationships, self-care, career wins and losses, and so much more. Oh, and moments like this. You know what? Sometimes the grass is greener on the other side because it's fake.
Well, that's why I mentioned muting. There are some people who will check you.
We got some petty people in our lives. I was crying by the water because I was happy.
And I do love a clear.
Wine will be spilled, laughs will be had, and a few tears might be shed. Messes will be made, but we're going to find our magic in the middle of them. Don't miss new episodes every Wednesday. Find Hot Happy Mess on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Elliot Kalin, comedian, author, history buff, and host of the Who Was podcast, a history quiz show based on the best-selling book series where kid contestants go toe-to-toe for a chance to win fantastic prizes. My co-host B,
that's me,
and I ask the tough questions like,
would Mozart like TikTok?
But that's not all we talk about on the show.
Usually my signature look is bedhead.
All right, I like it.
I do gymnastics, and I have 2 scars.
Are the scars from gymnastics, or were you, like, wrestling dinosaurs and things like that?
I really like history. Even my mom says I know more than most adults do.
We've got fun games, silly songs.
And don't forget to mention our amazing guests.
It's me, Frida Kahlo. Bonjour, c'est moi, Marie Curie.
Hello, everyone. It's me, Aretha Franklin.
Listen to the Who Was podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
It's the Who Was podcast, because it's time to play the Who Was podcast. Who Was?
Hello, I'm Stacey Wilson Hunt, your host for Inventing Anna, the official podcast. From Shonda Rhimes and the creators at Shondaland, Inventing Anna tells the story of a young woman who charmed her way into the pocketbooks of New York's elite.
Was she gonna take off with that $20 million from the banks, or was she gonna pour it into this foundation?
You know, people look at Anna and see what they want to see.
On this podcast, you'll get VIP access to the real people who inspired the television series and to the actors and creatives like showrunner Shonda Rhimes who brought them to life.
We were working on the show while the trial was going on. I remember doing a dramatic reading of Todd's opening statement for the writer's room.